Yeah, good evening, and thank you for coming. I mean, it's my first time, I have to admit, my first time in Warsaw, and it is a lovely city. So, and of course, as a geographer and as a mythographer, actually, which I am, is trying to compare all the time. It's inevitable. So, and thank you, Joanna, for the introduction. I didn't understand much, but I could recognize myself. I mean, certain words are international. So, I'm going to spend some time with you this evening, kind of touring, tell you the story of Tel Aviv, which is a huge story. It's a very young city, which the city celebrates this year 110 years, quite young. Well, Jews say that they wish you till 120. I hope that Tel Aviv will live a little longer than 120. It seems like this. But what I really want to do is to tell you this story through the myth of the city, because it's something very peculiar about Tel Aviv. The more I speak, do you understand what I mean? And of course, the punchline will be at the end and not now, because I don't want to give it now. But there is something very special in Tel Aviv. Of course, I have to qualify in the sense that the first part of the discussion, which is much more historical, I really can follow it. I mean, the second part, where I talk about other myths, are much more contemporary myths, are not part of my everyday life, but you will understand it later what I'm talking about. But I'm going to take you in a tour, through a tour of myths of Tel Aviv, and it's very clear where I'm talking about 3.5 myths. You'll see it. Okay, so let's begin with a few things, like this sentence. Unfortunately, it's not mine. The greatness of a city is what it is said to be. Actually, it also applies to people, I think. Actually, things are never what they are. They are what we talk about, what we say about them. This is the myth. And today I was very proud to walk the streets of Warsaw and just suddenly to see a plaque, memorial plaque, to see that Leszek Kołakowski lived here. And I said, oh, wow, because I'm using his ideas about myth, I will not burden you with that. But the whole idea of a myth is kind of when you take an aspect of something and you say, this is the thing itself. Actually, to make it very simple, myth for me is what the city is about, how people talk about the city, what they say the city is. The city is that and that and that, and that is the myth, because the city is much more than its myth. And the reality and the myth is, of course, a topic in itself. But that's how people perceive things, and people, if you want, that's how we understand celebrities, the same way. And this is the idea I took from Kołakowski without the word celebrity. This is the road from Haifa to Tel Aviv. I live in Tel Aviv. I work at Haifa University. So there is a piece. This is the first sign on my road back from Haifa University to Tel Aviv when I see the sign Tel Aviv. And this is the feeling, well, I'm heading home. You know, this is the kind of Tel Aviv for me. It's a rainy day, which is quite a rarity in Israel. And just to give you a map, this is the only date I give to geography to see where Israel is, Tel Aviv is on the map of Israel. You could see Tel Aviv there on the left, and Jerusalem, and Beersheba, and Haifa in the north. Haifa and Tel Aviv is 100 kilometers. Tel Aviv and Beersheba is also 100 kilometers. So if I tell you that Tel Aviv is the center of the country, it's true, also geometrically. That's how it is. This is, actually, I'm talking about birth. And let me talk a bit about the beginning, because I'm fascinated personally by beginnings, because this is something which is kind of ex nihilo, something which is magic happens. And this is the beginning of Tel Aviv. This is a photo, which is a mythical photo in the simple sense of the term, because just 10 years ago, I was in another conference for 100 years Tel Aviv, and there was some 20 or 30 presentations, and each one of them began with the same photo. So it's a kind of the photo, whenever I see it, I find it a little funny. This is supposed to be the lottery. When the founders of Tel Aviv, 60, originally 66 families later, I mean, most 6 families more means that it was a successful project. The people you say, oh, we are also part of it, a good sign. And they were dividing amongst themselves the lottery of the plots. And it's no one knows actually if what it is. It's supposed to be April 1909. That's the beginning of the city, the founding. Another question: what is really founding? I'll say a word about. What is the beginning really? And you can see what I love about this is the idea at the beginning was the sand, because what you see are people and sand. Okay, it's funny because in a way it is a statement. Because a city, what is a city? Building? Yeah, I will show you many buildings. but city is actually people, the people who live there. This is the main thing about people. That's what you see here. And the sand. The sand, which will be covered by buildings and actually serves also as the building material of the city. They use it for building the city. The sand is not over there. Of course, on a more critical level, everyone, I mean, today said, yeah, we know this picture. It looks like, a new city in the desert or in nowhere. But of course, if the camera would have moved a little to the left, you could see the city of Jaffa. I mean, a few hundred meters to the left. So, but that doesn't matter, actually, because it represents the idea that people were about building something new. And this is the main thing about Tel Aviv, at least the first phase of it, which is a new beginning. Let me say something about it. It's the same idea of at the beginning of the city built on sand. It's the same applies to Gdynia, which is also city built on sand. But I think the more powerful idea behind is taken, and the founders of Tel Aviv came from Russia, actually southern Russia, very familiar with Russian mythology. Of course, the idea is St. Petersburg. But here it's the sand, because this is the Orient, the Levant. St. Petersburg was founded in 1703 on swamps. And this is the founding myth of St. Petersburg. Tel Aviv and St. Petersburg, very different cities, but play mythologically on quite the same themes, which I find interesting. I go on the right, what you see is the stamp, postage stamp issued when Tel Aviv celebrated its 100th anniversary. And you can see the idea, the same image appears there too. But look at the background, what you see, this is the modern city. Of course, the founders couldn't think about it. So the story I'll tell you actually is the story of the postage stamp from this group of people. One family there is the same family name as mine, but it's not my family, unfortunately. And the city behind, which is contemporary Tel Aviv. Oh. Yeah, just to give you another view of what it is. This is a map of, I don't know, Jaffa mainly and Tel Aviv, 1923. Forget about the port here. I mean, Tel Aviv is full of projects and Jaffa that were never realized. This is another one which was never realized. The port, just a plan. Tel Aviv is what you see on the right, above on the right. I mean, the rest is Jaffa. Jaffa, I'm not going to talk about Jaffa, but very important to say now, Jaffa was a mixed Arab, Muslim, Christian, Jewish city. Why Tel Aviv was founded beside it? Because it was the main port of the country. It's like New York. Jews came there and stayed there, or moved a little to the north. But the idea to found the city was the idea of leaving Jaffa and having a Jewish settlement, and I will talk about it. Just to see how it looks today, Jaffa is below, and the coastline and Tel Aviv. To tell you something, it's funny, because when I look at this photo, this image on the right, Tel Aviv looks quite small, and it is a small city. I mean, I tell you the big secret now. It's 430,000 residents. Okay, the metropolitan area is much bigger. I had the same feeling when I landed on a plane coming to Warsaw. I saw Warsaw for the first time from above. Also looked quite small. But when you walk the city, it's not so small as you look from there. So there is something there. So 2 images, 180 years apart. The first myth is Tel Aviv, the first Hebrew city. I mean, I will divide it into 3. There is the first, and there is the city, and there is the Hebrew. Well, the first is, Tel Aviv was not founded as a city. It was founded as a neighborhood. For people, 60 families, 66, who had the money, they took a loan, and they wanted to improve their quality of life. That was the whole idea. There were one guy there, actually quite forgotten at the beginning, a Jew who came to Palestine. There was no Palestine then. I'm talking about, I forgot to say, but I'm talking about a country which is ruled by, it's part of the Ottoman Empire. This is, the Turks are there, the Ottomans are there. And he came from Łódź. He was a watchmaker, and he had a great idea of having a city. And the first Hebrew city, the first time he wrote a document, probably from 1906. I'm not so sure it's authentic today, but never mind that, in which they say, kind of declaration, we are going to build the first Hebrew city. So the first time he said it. Second, he also said, and it should be like New York of the land of Israel, which the mayor of Tel Aviv repeats saying it again and again and again. Of course, it didn't mean New York as we understand it, it meant a port city. And I'll come to the port later to show you. Because Jews will come to the port of Tel Aviv, will stay there like New York, and the rest is story. Of course, if you have a Jewish city, a Zionist city, it's not a big surprise that the main street would be Herzl Street. But Herzl actually is everywhere in Tel Aviv. Because let me say something mythological about the name Tel Aviv. Tel Aviv means, it's actually a translation of a book, of Herzl's book. Herzl is the founding father of political Zionism, died 1904, so the time is fitting. And he wrote a book, the book he wrote was Alt Neuland. This was his big idea, this utopian book, translated into Hebrew, 1902, as Tel Aviv. Alt Neuland, German, I mean, old new country. Tel means, you know, archaeological site. Aviv in Hebrew means spring, so it's old and new, etc. So I think Tel Aviv, maybe I'm wrong, it's the only city in the world which is named after a book. Because usually it's the other way around, but okay, that's another part of it. So of course, Herzl Street is the main street, and just to show you on the left, the main institution, the first big public institution in this Jewish neighborhood is not a synagogue, it's a gymnasium. It's the Herzliya Gymnasium against Herzl, where they taught in Hebrew. That was the great thing. And it took me some time to understand that in the first 20 years of Tel Aviv, the whole idea, and now I'm a little early, but the gymnasium was much more important than I always guessed. I always talked about the ideology and teaching Hebrew and to have a gymnasium as a cultural institution, not a university. The Hebrew University would be founded later, and not in Tel Aviv, but in Jerusalem. But the idea is that many young youth came from Russia mainly, and Eastern Europe, but many from Russia, to study there. So Tel Aviv actually began as, which is a funny idea to think about it, like a college town, American college town. Many young people, alone or with someone with them, renting apartments, which means from the start, rents were very high. And young people with energies. I mean, that's the beginning of Tel Aviv, and this is part of the DNA, if you want, of the city till today. It was actually a university town, if you want. That's the way it began. But of course, the message was cultural and Zionist, the Hebrew city. On the right, you can see how it looked, this neighborhood at the beginning. One thing that I should also mention, that people don't really are aware of, that Tel Aviv was not the only neighborhood founded by Jews at that time, getting out of Jaffa, which was Oriental city, and I don't want to elaborate what it meant as a city. Think about it. But all these neighborhoods, new neighborhoods, joined Tel Aviv. And the secret was that Tel Aviv was the only neighborhood which had water. And water was the most important thing. They had a water tower. This photo on the right is taken from the water tower. So that's why Tel Aviv actually is the city, and the other neighborhoods are today just part of Tel Aviv, without everyone being aware that they were once independent neighborhoods. They all joined Tel Aviv. Water, very important. And this is how it looks a little in the 1920s. I mean, it's developing. If everyone knows Tel Aviv, on the right is the entrance to the Carmel Market. This building on the left is still there. It was built in 1924. It stands there. That's how I know it. This is Schenken Street on the other side. You see the sand. Remember, built on sand. Still, you can still see it. And it's a modern city. It's a modern city. Tel Aviv is a very modern city, by the way. It's not a city yet. Tel Aviv is part of Jaffa officially. It got the status of a township in 1921 by the British. 1918, the British are there in this country, which in 1920 is called officially Palestine, British Mandate Palestine by the League of Nations. But Tel Aviv is modern. And what does it mean to be modern? First of all, it's about town planning. This is the city. This is the Geddes plan. Patrick Geddes was a Scottish town planner who worked in India too, in Jerusalem and in Tel Aviv. And he has this idea of a garden city. Look to the right, what does a garden city mean? Very simple. I'm not going into the plan, but what I explain to you is, show you is actually the idea that buildings are not connected, they are separate from each other, and there is vegetations. This is how it looks. It's a photo I took a week ago just to show you how nice it looks in October. I thought it would be gray here to show you the blue sky, but it didn't work, yeah. So that's how it looks, really garden. Of course, these small gardens in front and in between the houses, if you are lucky, if some residents are lucky, today they could convert it into parking places, but not everyone is lucky like this. Sometimes you still find these beautiful things. And this is the city, oh, maybe I'll go back, just to say, I'll do it chronologically, so I'm now at 1929. Tel Aviv is celebrating its 20th anniversary. I think Tel Aviv is the first city in the world, maybe the only one, to celebrate its 20th anniversary. Usually they wait 100 years, or 50 if they're really in a hurry. 20 years, that's, everything is quicker than it should be, but it is. Why? I think there is an explanation. 1925, 24, the so-called fourth aliyah, fourth wave of immigration, comes from Poland to Palestine. There are merchants, there are people with a little money, they buy plots, they build like crazy, and then there is a crisis, economic crisis, a big one, and the city looks like it's dying. So actually the 20th anniversary celebration was a kind of a rebirth that the city came back to life, because people were writing this idea of building a Jewish city on the sands near the Mediterranean. It's a crazy project, forget about it, let the sands take the city back, that's it. No, it worked. 1929, we are talking about already about 40,000 Jews living there. And I'm saying Jews, I mean it. Okay, and the city is being built. I will not go into it now, but what you see here is the new style. The Gdynia Tel Aviv exhibition is very much about it. It's the new international style coming to Tel Aviv. 1930, everything which is built after 1930, it's international style. Very important also for my lecture and for the mythology of Tel Aviv. But just look on the right, I found this photo on the right hilarious, yes. I mean, you see the international style, modernism at its best, and camels. I mean, this kind that's together, it really encapsulates the entire story of a modern city in the Orient, in the Levant. This is the story. On the left, I feel a little bit more closer personally, because this is the area of Tel Aviv. When I live here, and when I first met this, I saw this picture, I was amazed to see what they had already in 1935, to see that the main street of Tel Aviv, Dizengoff Street, is not a street yet. I mean, it's not paved, so, but it's being built like crazy, but it's a construction site. The whole city is a construction site. 30s, these are German Jews coming to Tel Aviv from Germany, 60,000, settled, not all of them in Tel Aviv, but it means a lot of construction. I want to say something here now. I mean, you remember the maps I showed you. Tel Aviv is moving on two planes. One plane from the beginning is with the back to Jaffa, from south to north. I mean, that was the dream, the north, with the back to Jaffa, away from Jaffa. Another one, which was later, is up. I mean, like, you know it from Warsaw. I mean, everything is the skyline. I mean, I'll show you later. But the city is moving to the right, the build to the right, to the north, sorry. Oh, again. Just before I would like to finish, just a minute to finish the city. Tel Aviv was proclaimed by the British government a city in 1934, January 12th. The British didn't want to declare the city, Tel Aviv, a city, even so it was quite big. It was actually the biggest city in British Palestine. It was 100 residents in the end of the 30s, but it was political thing, so not to separate between Jaffa and to keep a kind of illusion that it's one city or there's kind of cooperation. Jews and Arabs did not really cooperate. At the beginning, the best, it was kind of polite disengagement. It could be violent, but I will not really go into it. But this is, of course, the big thing about Tel Aviv, the city that in the 20s is called the city of wonder. Tel Aviv was very proud of itself. They were all the time giving, I mean, kind of the compliments to itself from the start. But people really Jews came from abroad, and not only Jews, and was surprised by this thing. You know, you can find this kind of text, or variation on this text, in 1,000 texts, the idea that this is a Jewish city. In Hebrew, it's a Hebrew city, and it's important, not a Jewish city, it's a Hebrew city. And what is the idea? You can read it. Everyone, from the mayor to the last, I don't know, sweeper on the street, they are all workers, everyone is a Jew. The Jew built a city. Why is it important? Because Tel Aviv became the model of the so-called national home. One big difference between Gdynia and Tel Aviv is that Gdynia was a project of the Polish government, a new port. Tel Aviv was a project from below of private initiative of people who invested money and settled there, and suddenly they realized, oh, there is a city there. Oh, it's a Hebrew city. Oh, it's the first one. Oh, and that's how it works, but it's from below and it worked. So it was a kind of, wow, what a great achievement it is, especially in the 30s when the situation of Jews in Europe was not very bright, let us say it in a kind of an understatement, okay? So Tel Aviv was a kind of, that was a kind of destination, just people wrote about, I found some text like, I mean, someone wrote, I think it's in an exhibition too, Gdynia, Tel Aviv. It was appeared in Warsaw it was appeared in a Yiddish newspaper like that every Jew should need a place to Tel Aviv, he should come to Tel Aviv and recuperate from the situation abroad, and then could go back home and feel better, like having a kind of staying a vacation in this Hebrew city. So, of course, for me, the most, I would say, cool thing to find was a text by a Nazi journalist who visited Palestine in 1934. He wrote a series of articles about his visit. It's really called, if you know German, a Nazi fährt nach Palästina. Nazi goes to Palestine. And he comes with a ship to Haifa, then travels around the country and tells, it's really a praise, a big praise of Zionism and what Jews are doing there. And what he writes about Tel Aviv, he fell in love with the city. Really, it could be a Zionist text if you wouldn't know who the guy was. Of course, it took me some time to understand what happened there. He was telling, actually, writing to Jews in Berlin, tell them, don't be afraid to go to the Orient. It's a great place, go there. Just live. That's the story. His name is Lim, but that's another story. We can talk for an hour about the guy. What is the Hebrew? Well, the Hebrew, you remember the first Hebrew city, it became a city in 1934. It's a city already. What is the Hebrew city? What is Hebrew? Well, it's a language, but Hebrew is much more than a language. Hebrew is identity. Hebrew is renewal. Hebrew, at that time, for many Jews in Tel Aviv, Hebrew is not Yiddish, okay? This is the most important thing. I'll say something about it. But just one thing about the political independence of Tel Aviv. Tel Aviv is an example of Jewish self-rule. Look to the right on these street signs. Tel Aviv was the first settlement neighborhood in Palestine, I would call it Palestine, to introduce street names, which is, of course, modernity. There were no street names in Jerusalem or in Jaffa, because this is a European idea of how to regulate space. And the politics or culture, or cultural politics, if you want, look at the order of the languages. Hebrew above, English, which is the official language of the country, British, is in the middle, and Arabic below. I will come back to it, but look how it, in Jerusalem, you see this is the official order of languages. Jerusalem is the capital of British Mandate Palestine. English, which is the official language, Arabic, which is the majority language, and Hebrew below. I found one of the nicest letters I found in the archive was about these languages. 1926, a British official asked the mayor of Tel Aviv, Mayor Dizengoff, because the city was about to introduce street signs, and they asked him to also add Arabic to that. And Dizengoff said, fine, okay, if Jaffa adds Hebrew to its signs. And I never knew what happens about Jaffa because they changed the street signs after 48. I mean, I never knew how it was. And no one takes pictures of street names, only me. So, street signs. But then I found one, I mean, one photo, and I could see what happened in Jaffa. In Jaffa, it's funny, it was a really mirror picture of Tel Aviv. Arabic above, English in the middle, and Hebrew below. So, that's the story. So, this is the Hebrew. But another thing was the language, the official language of the city. And the official language of the city, that's a big fight. It's a fight that goes on, that people are like the slogan was, a Hebrew should talk Hebrew, which again, they couldn't do anything about Arabic, which was an official language. They couldn't do anything about English, which was an official language. But of course, we have Yiddish, you have Polish, you have all languages the Jews brought with them. They were all, well, Tel Aviv was a city of immigrants. It was a melting pot of many of Jews, all of Jews, but coming from different countries, Romania, Lithuania, Latvia, I mean, speaking their own languages, Russia, Ukraine. And there was a huge campaign to force people that the signs will be in Hebrew, or at least that Hebrew will be dominant on the signs. The same campaign you had in Quebec by the French and against the English to get the English out of the signs. Complaints to the police. Of course, the police, British police didn't do anything about it. It's going to come pressure. A little violence sometimes. You know, you can break things, yes, like window shops. But luckily for the people who came in the 20s, the target of the 30s, of course, were the German Jews who came. The target was German. Don't use German, but that was because of the Nazis too. So this was the issue. There are still people today, older people, who are very much into this campaign. They are against foreign languages in the science, but it belongs to the 30s. So that's the way it is. That's the Hebrew. Another aspect, which was really very minor when we talk about the first Hebrew city, with all the idea of Jewish self-rule and Hebrew culture and Hebrew revival and new beginning on a national level, on a city level, everything is new. Remember, I mean, there is no state behind Tel Aviv. It comes from below. There is no state to help them, to finance them. It's a kind of self-initiative, which is a great idea with all the problems entailed. But there was another aspect. I hinted at it. This is called, I call it the joyful city. I mean, Tel Aviv was a very vibrant place, and people write about it. A lot of energy. This is part of the DNA. Now it's, you will experience it, don't worry. But I was surprised or happy or glad to find such things also from the 30s. Meyer Weisgal, he was an American Jew, and he was the secretary of President Weizmann later. It was a kind of a person in itself. But this was his impression for his first visit to Tel Aviv in 1938. Of course, the most important place is the beach. I mean, everything about Tel Aviv is the beach. If Tel Aviv wouldn't have been on the beach, I guess it wouldn't be just a dead city. It's the beach. I don't want to go into anthropology, but it's, of course, a liminal territory. I read today, before I came here again, a report from the 30s about the beach, where, I mean, just, we are not aware of it, but the difference between how people were dressed on the beach and in the city was huge. Today, everyone is half naked, whatever, wherever. But then, I mean, if you move 10 meters from the beach and you are dressed improperly, in the archive of Tel Aviv, I found all of these complaints about how people are dressed. It's huge, huge files of complaints because the beach is a different territory, and it means much. Of course, for a city of immigrants like Tel Aviv, the beach was important because the apartments were small, too many people in apartments, and this was a free space for people, especially Tel Aviv, where everything is built, no gardens, no parks. Walking in Warsaw, I mean, to see so many parks, I mean, that's not Tel Aviv. Okay, you have some trees between the buildings, but parks it's not something that you see, really. Okay, so the beach was a second home for many, and of course, to take shower. As simple as that. So this is the beach, which is considered today to be, I tell you, secret, one of the best of the world, but since I don't like it so much, I can just talk about it. Again, Zionism, first Hebrew city. 1934 on the left, the city celebrates its Silver Jubilee 25th anniversary. Remember 5 years ago it was 20 years, it goes very quickly. And on the right is the Levant Fair, because the vision of the city was as a fair, it's like Leipzig, international commerce center. This is a beautiful place, nothing is remained in this area, but the interesting thing is, of course, that there were many national pavilions, and there was a Polish pavilion too. I mean, one should look for the plans probably in Poland because in Tel Aviv you don't find them, but that's another story. That's the Levant Fair. The last one was 36 because then the Arab Uprising began and that was the end of this dream of Tel Aviv. Let me talk a little about the emblem. This is from 1924, 5, 6, no one really knows. We know who did it, but I think it's a beautiful document. It tells us something, the sign. forget about the colors. I don't know where the green comes from. Probably the green is from the gardens that you don't have. Probably that's the only green you had in the city at that time. But what you see above is not Tel Aviv, but the municipality of Tel Aviv, that's modest. And what you can see is actually a sea and a lighthouse, but more important, you see a gate. And this is the vision behind Tel Aviv, as I told you, as the entrance gate to the land of Israel. It's a port, but Tel Aviv doesn't have a port, not yet. The stars, that's a little tricky. It has nothing to do with Tel Aviv, but this is the vision of Theodor Herzl. He was also a social visionary. In his vision, utopia if you want, people would work 7 hours a day. In this respect, Tel Aviv has not yet reached it, even so that they say the workers in the municipality work less than 7 hours a day. I mean, but I don't know, probably had nothing to do with that. So let me continue with the port. This is the port of Tel Aviv, which doesn't exist anymore. It was not a port. It was a jetty, if you see, you can see, just a jetty. It was, the vision was there. The main port of the land of Palestine was Haifa. It was a British imperial port, huge port. Now the Chinese built a second one, of course. And Jaffa, which was adjacent to Tel Aviv, but it was operated by Arabs. 1936, April, the Arab Uprising, Palestinian, today would say Palestinian uprising begins. Of course, there is a strike, no ships. The Jews got permission by the British, they had not wanted it, to build a jetty so that oranges could be sent to Europe. And this is it. That's how they got the port. I love it because this is a kind of a Happy New Year card that I got from the archive a week ago. People really used the port. It was very important. It became part of everyday life like this. And the whole idea to the right, this is what I wrote also for the catalog of the exhibition here, is the idea of the port as the gate to Zion. It says the gate to Zion. There were many gates to Zion. There were 3. I will talk about them. This is, of course, the destination. But the entrance, the passenger's port was only opened 2 years later, 1938. And the old port was closed in 1939 when the war began, okay? So it was very short, short lifespan of the port, just to make it, no, I'll tell you later what happened then. Look at, oh, I will do it again. This is the port, this is the vision. I mean, I found this photo, beautiful plan of the futuristic, I would say, port, found at the museum or the room, office of the mayor, of the mayor. This was the plan. It was never realized. This idea, the nice thing about visions, you have beautiful plans and nothing happens. And just to the right to see how it really looked, I mean, a jetty and camels, and you understand the picture. I found one of the jokes, because people were not so stupid about this port. It was a huge issue for everyone, because the port was a symbol of independence. I mean, we are in control. Think about Gdynia, what it is, because everyone could use Danzig, but Gdynia, I mean, independence. But it was not so very much. So the joke I found in the newspaper the other day was that someone built there a kiosk in the area and put a big sign, restaurant, the port of Tel Aviv. So people come to say, well, that's not a restaurant, that's a kiosk. Say, well, if this is a port, this is a restaurant. So this is the story here. And of course, well, you can read it for yourself. This is the Polonia, the first ship actually to anchor to bring passengers from Europe, Jews, to the port of Tel Aviv. That was 1938. I found among the passengers was Artur Rupin, a Zionist leader, and he wrote in his diary that they got the news that they are going to be the first ship to anchor there, and everyone was very happy to be the first. So this is the Polonia. This is the line bringing Jews, the Polish line bringing Jews from Constanța, the port of Constanța in Romania, to actually Haifa, less Tel Aviv. Tel Aviv was always a very small port. And it's nice, you can see there on the right, in English, you see Poland, because it's Constanța is not Poland, and the last down there is Tel Aviv. So it was important to separate. Quite huge ships compared to the other line bringing Jews from Trieste, from Italy, to Haifa mainly, and Tel Aviv. I guess people in Poland and something with the camel, because you see the camel here too. I mean, these huge two ships, the Polonia and Kościuszko, and the camels. It tells you everything about the destination, I think, and about the imagination, the image of where are we going. I will finish this thing with the ship and Tel Aviv. Tel Aviv was a Zionist symbol. Actually, if you see propaganda, Zionist propaganda, and I use the term propaganda, they were meant like to be about Zionism in the 30s, you can see mostly about the kibbutzim. I mean, that was the big idea of Zionism. But Tel Aviv was powerful, even though it didn't have a sponsor, a Zionist sponsor. And Tel Aviv was so famous or so important that it lived also, Tel Aviv was extended beyond Tel Aviv. On the left, the first Jewish ship, there was a failed, actually, company that was founded in 1975. Their ship was called Tel Aviv, SS Tel Aviv. After 2 years, the ship was sold because the company failed. And in the newspaper said, Tel Aviv is sold to the Japanese, and then said, not the city, the ship. Yeah, so everybody was making fun of it. And this is the New York World Fair 1939. This is the Jewish Palestine pavilion there. It was a huge, huge display of Zionist propaganda there, I mean, in New York. And the restaurant in this pavilion was called Tel Aviv. And I have it on the menu, which is a very Jewish menu, nothing to do with Tel Aviv, but it's funny that Tel Aviv was such a symbol that you could find it elsewhere too. Part of the myth, it's beyond the city, of course. Okay, just to make it a little, what is about Jaffa, 1948, I'll tell a very tragic story, a sad story, or happy one. The war of Israel's war of independence, 48, Jaffa, the city of Jaffa surrenders just the day before Israel was proclaimed as an independent state. And there were no Arabs, or the Arabs left the city beforehand. It was filled immediately by immigrants, Jaffa, Jewish immigrants from Bulgaria mainly at that time. And then was the question what to do with Jaffa. Against what people say, Tel Aviv was never interested in Jaffa. The mayor, Rokach, was not interested in Jaffa because it was a poor city with new immigrants, poor people, bad infrastructure. He wanted the new areas to the north. That's what he wanted. But the Israeli government forced him to annex or to take Tel Aviv, and even suggested that the new city would be called Yafo Tel Aviv. So there was a small demonstration, and the government decided, okay, we give in, and the new city, unified city, is called Tel Aviv Yafo till today. I mean, because the mayor didn't like it. It's nice to see, interesting to see that the mayor didn't want it. Actually, the only one who's called the city Tel Aviv Yafo, Tel Aviv Jaffa, is the mayor. Everyone else refers to Tel Aviv, and if you say Jaffa, they refer to another place. In popular imagination, there are still two entities. But if you talk officially, it's Tel Aviv Yafo, and the mayor, who was not born in Tel Aviv, for him, that's Tel Aviv Yafo. Do it quickly. This is the founder's monument. Actually, it should have been 49, but of course it takes longer, so it was inaugurated 51. The 66 families, I'm not there. Of course, the postage stamps tell the story of building the city. This is 1949, and that's 1959, the postage stamp for the 50th anniversary is very interesting because it shows you a few buildings. The biggest one is the building of the trade unions, which says, I think, much about Israel in the 50s. Well, quasi-socialist country. I mean, that's how you can see it. The building in the front is the Herzliya Gymnasium, which I told you before. I mean, and just, this is the end, I would say, of the phase in the history of Tel Aviv as the first Hebrew city. Because at this stage, Tel Aviv became something awful happened to it, and not just a normal city, which did not have to explain to itself what we are, just living its life. This is Tel Aviv 1959. And to show you how it looked, this quiet period is this, the beach, the National Theater, a beautiful square in the middle of the city. I will not go into it, I don't have time. And the Hal HaTarbut, which is the Hall of Culture, which is where the Israel Philharmonic plays. I mean, and in the middle, that's the vision. In the middle is the Shalom Tower. The Shalom has nothing to do with peace, it's the family. It's 32 stories. When it was built in the 60s, it was the tallest building, not only in Tel Aviv, but in Israel and in the Middle East. things changed, okay? This was the tallest one. And it was built when the gymnasia was. They demolished the gymnasia and built this building, which today everyone thinks, how could you do that? How could you do that? But at that time, it was the most natural thing. You take something which is old, you demolish it, and you build something modern. That's how you do. Like you replace your car. But today, it's called like a crime against, no, not humanity, against the cosmos, I think. Okay, I'm going now quickly to this next stage of Tel Aviv, which is much more contemporary. And that is the non-stop city. It's a slogan which was invented in 1999. I know exactly the guy who did it. We argue about why he took it. I'm sure that he copied it, emulated from New York, non-stop city. He has other ideas, but I respect them. He said it was his original idea, but let me doubt it. And why was it invented? Because the city was in crisis. Tourists, I mean, it was an attempt to lure Israeli tourists to Tel Aviv. It's a non-stop city, there is much to do. I liked it very much to see that this non-stop appeared immediately everywhere. Like the hot dog, there are many. I have a whole collection of businesses with this non-stop thing. And of course, this is the official one. You see the stand to the left. I will go forward, fast forward. 10 years ago, the municipality, the mayor decided that this slogan doesn't work. So they hired a company, American company, to find a new slogan for the city. And they made a huge research. It cost some million shekel, which is something like million zloty. And they came to the conclusion that it should be non-stop city because that's what the population wanted. So it's a very successful one, actually. And yes, that's how it works sometimes. But at least now we know, after so much research, that that's what the people like. They feel, they identify with this slogan. And you see it whenever I get a letter from the municipality, it's written big there. Another thing is, in the early 90s, you could see there were many newspaper reports about the non-stop city, which meant, actually it was not a non-stop city. And when people got a job at the newspaper, one of the jobs they got was, go and check if it's a non-stop city. So I have a collection of articles describing what is open in the city at night. You know, gas station there, a barber shop there. But it's clear it's not a stop city. But sometimes, you know, slogans are much stronger than reality. And sometimes even slogans really influence reality. And reality becomes like the slogan. That's what happened to Tel Aviv. But at that time, 1989, more the stop than the non, okay. And what happened to the port? I'm talking about the non-stop city. Actually, I'm talking about, I would call it, but it's a little tricky, I would talk about something like, if the first Hebrew city was the Zionist city, the non-stop city is the post-Zionist city, which is actually not ideological on this level of politics and ideology, but actually it's about vibrancy, about city that is open to the world, open to itself, very much aware of itself, and fun-loving and hedonistic. And this is what happened to the port. The port of Tel Aviv was closed in '65. They built another one to the south. It was empty for many years. And of course, like every other city in the world, what you do with an empty port, you make it into restaurants, places for people to come, enjoy life, and families to go, full of life. This is the port of Tel Aviv, second life of the port, which is actually, I would say that the story of the port of Tel Aviv is actually reflects the story of the city itself, from a Zionist to a kind of a post-Zionist. Just a place to go and enjoy life. What happened there? I didn't mention it, and I cannot really go into it because it's too much. Of course, I talked about the myth of Tel Aviv, St. Petersburg. The other part of the St. Petersburg myth is the rivalry between St. Petersburg and Moscow. And Tel Aviv has Jerusalem. 60 kilometers apart, two different worlds. I mean, I just had a visitor from Germany a month ago, and he spent time in Tel Aviv, then went to Jerusalem, and he was shocked. I mean, as if these two cities are not in the same country, but it's not the issue even. The issue is that it's part of the myth because it's part of the conversation about, mostly Tel Avivians talk about it, that Jerusalem is religious and Tel Aviv is secular. Jerusalem is up, Tel Aviv is down, Tel Aviv is like hell, and this is part, you know, all these kind of cliches about two cities like very much Moscow and Tel Aviv without the hell and paradise, okay? And down, up, this is the whole idea, because Tel Aviv is on the beach, Jerusalem is in the mountains, The religious thing is very important too. Jerusalem is reactionary. Jerusalem is very oriental, part of Iran. Tel Aviv is very west-oriented, things like this. And it's a kind of a continuous talk. But what I found here, I mean, that's the only numbers I show you. I find it interesting to discover when I build this thing, is that, look, Tel Aviv was always the big city until 73, something like that, mid-70s. Then Jerusalem is the blue climbing. Tel Aviv is, well, the same. Jerusalem became the capital, the real capital of the. Tel Aviv had to reinvent itself as the non-stop city, and this is what happened here. Again, non-stop city, of course the city stops sometimes, Tel Aviv especially. This is when the city stops. This is Rabin assassinations, 95. I mean, these are moments in the history where punctuated and everything stopped. As if the non-stop city, this hedonistic city, is reminded where it is, in the area where it is, the neighborhood, as they call it. Yeah. This is not far from where I live. This was the first bus that with suicide bomber in Tel Aviv, 1995. It's amazing to see, because this is how it looks immediately after it happened. The small memorial there, it's full of coffee shops, man. People just live close to the memorial, and life goes on, which is part of, I think, the DNA of Tel Aviv. Third myth. The third myth is, let's call it the white city. It's the rebirth of the white city. And it's a complicated story. Because if you listen to the conversation of, which I heard yesterday too, of architects, Tel Aviv was built, remember, in the 30s, the international style. Wow, modernism, what a great thing. Interestingly or not, I discovered, quite recently I have to say, checking the newspapers from the period, now it's very easy because everything is digitized and searching newspapers is an easy thing, which before it was not. Actually, no one wrote about architecture in the 30s, nothing. If there was a few things about buildings, the new buildings there, it was complaints. The apartments were smaller, not so nice as the old ones from the 20s. I mean, I do suspect that they talk so much about ideology, but this is how the architects talk. Like, you know, modernism was brought, the people came from Bauhaus. We have now the 100th anniversary of the Bauhaus school in Germany. So in Tel Aviv, it's called the Bauhaus. Even so, only one architect from the Bauhaus worked in Tel Aviv, but it doesn't really matter. But suddenly in 1930, there was this change before the old and the new modernist style. What happened? I don't know. I cannot prove it, but I can argue that I do suspect, but I cannot prove it, I say it again, that what happened was that suddenly owners, people who owned plots of land and wanted to build, found a cheap way to do it. Because the new style is much cheaper than the old style. That's all. And that's explained to me how come it was like fire in the woods. Immediately everything was like this. But I cannot prove it. People didn't write about it. People didn't relate to it, if at all, as I said, with some criticism and actually not a bad thing. The funny thing is that in Palestine, Jewish Palestine, no one wrote about this new style. Not even the architects were writing about it. They were busy building or planning. But the first, I found it also quite recently, this summer, a book that appeared in England in 1943. It's an amazing quality of a book because it's wartime and the book is in very good quality. I was quite surprised. It was about architecture and he said, okay, we don't build now, so it's time to think about it because of the war. And it's a book about in favor of traditional British architecture and against modernism. This is the idea here. And then I found this line. I will read it loud. And probably the best places in the world to study the new architecture, and probably the best places in the world to study the new architecture, that's how he calls it, are the Jewish settlements at Haifa and Tel Aviv in Palestine. I mean, I think you are the first to hear it in a lecture. I mean, this sentence, amazing. Why is it amazing? Because they knew about it in England, but they didn't know anything about it in Palestine. The real discovery in Israel now, of this style, it's in the late 80s. And it's one man, I know the guy. He has a name, Michael Levin, professor, doctor, architectural historian. And he he created an exhibition in 1995 about, it's called The White City, and it's about modernist architecture in Haifa, Jerusalem, and Tel Aviv, not Tel Aviv. But 3 years later, it's all about Tel Aviv suddenly. This is the DNA of Tel Aviv. No one talks about Haifa, no one talks about Jerusalem. Tel Aviv appropriated, if you want, this modernism as part of its identity. And of course, like any, I didn't tell you the big secret that Tel Aviv is very provincial. And of course, if you bring someone from abroad with a name, you know, Italian, Mario Bellini was the editor of Domos, a very important architectural magazine, and he to Tel Aviv and was amazed, that's what he says, to see this concentration on everything. This was the stamp people needed to know that there is something important there. Why is it also interesting? I grew up in Tel Aviv. Everyone, like me, we were quite well, we knew very well that Tel Aviv architecturally was an ugly city. No one talked about Tel Aviv as a beautiful city. Tel Aviv was supposed to be ugly compared to Jerusalem. Haifa is the beautiful view. Tel Aviv was just ugly, vibrant, hedonistic, fun, a lot of fun, but ugly. And suddenly they discover, oh, it's not so ugly. It's a white swan, I mean, really. And that was amazing to discover that, oh, what happened here? Well, yes, but the city was very quick to exploit the situation. 1994, I will make it very quickly, a World Congress, architects from all over the world to come to Tel Aviv, posted stamps about the international style. Then they decided also to call it Bauhaus because they asked 5 architects in Israel and they knew it by the name Bauhaus, so that's why it's Bauhaus now, which is ridiculous, but that's the way it is. False, 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 but, okay? And you see here, what you see here is a campaign. And the address of the campaign is UNESCO. Immediately you have many posters with these buildings and how they look. These are, on the right, it's on my street in Tel Aviv. The other is not far away too. Quite well-preserved examples. There are, just to give you some numbers, we're talking about 4,000 buildings in Tel Aviv that belong to this, to international style. 1,000 of these are inscribed and should be preserved. 200 of these are on strict preservation. Okay, so this is the story. But on the other hand, there are 1,000 on the list, which means that 3,000 are not on the list. Many of them are really ugly. I mean, that's the way it is. I didn't want to show you. I have an idea of making an album with these ugly buildings, because everyone just makes albums with the nice ones. What about the ugly ones? I'll do it. But I think no one will want to finance it. And this is, at last it came in 2003, the declaration by UNESCO declaring the White City of Tel Aviv, not Tel Aviv, as a World Heritage Site. You can read what it says here and why. Actually, this is the myth in its very clear and simple words. Tel Aviv is the second modern city to gain this status. The first is, I see someone says yes, well, is Brasilia, of course, in Brazil. And of course, the city is very happy about it. This is the invitation to the party. The city did the party a year later on the left. This is what was here. Look, read the provincialism, okay? Tel Aviv raised their heads up, and now the whole world knows why. Wow, the world is important. It's because we didn't see it for ourselves. And then, of course, it's done. When you look, you see the sign of the White City of Tel Aviv also on the floor sometimes. So you can't avoid it. Become part of the physical structure of the city if you want, like walking there. And this is how it looks today. On the right, it's where I live. And in a funny way, my address is actually the last stop in the heritage tour of the Bauhaus. So every Friday between 11 and 12, there is a group of tourists standing there. And they take pictures, and I take pictures, but I didn't want to show you today. And you can see another thing on the left, which I find interesting, how it's done in Tel Aviv, how you finance all this, is that people get permission to build above, and that's how they finance the renovation of this building, because the government or the municipality doesn't pay anything. It's everything the residents should pay, and it's a lot of money, because it's quite tough. I mean, there are demands, and it's done, but they give building rights on the roof. That's how it's done. The problem is that you cannot repeat it twice, that's all. But that's like a short vision thing. And the white city of Tel Aviv, the nice thing about the white city is it's not only white. If you want to be critical about it, there is a critical book. Of course, Tel Aviv is not white. There is the white city and there is the black city. The poor people, the Arabs, the Oriental Jews who live in Tel Aviv. Never. Well, of course, but Tel Aviv is not white and it's not black. I say it again and again, Tel Aviv is many colors. And the most dominant color in Tel Aviv is the yellow. And the yellow is actually, once was white. And you give it enough years in the sun of the Mediterranean, that's what you get, this yellow. I find this, I was on my way to the dentist. I mean, I remember the day very well, when I saw this building on my way. It's amazing, it's a before and after in one building. The left renovated it, part, it's symmetrical. The right didn't do anything. You can see how it looked and how it looks. One difference is, for example, I will not go into it, the idea was to close the balconies, which the municipality is very much against, but cannot do much about it. Why? To make the small apartment a little larger. But if you renovate, you have to open them. This is one of the things. You see on the left it's open, on the right it speaks for itself, I think. And you can see another one, it's a very important central junction in Tel Aviv. On the right, you see the building yellow, which was not renovated, beautiful international style. On the left, beautifully renovated with the addition above, you see, on the roof. This is how it works. You cannot see it when you stand below, but when you have a perspective, you see it very well. Again, and renovation doesn't mean that much is done. I mean, this is the house in Allenby Street. This is the city, the ugly city. Tel Aviv was ugly because of buildings like this no one took care of course. And on the right, just very adjacent to this one, what you see are buildings from the pre-international style, from the 20s, which people like very much too. But architects don't speak about them because they are kitschy. But they are very popular among people, just to show you how the city looks. We come to 2009. Tel Aviv celebrates 100 years. It was a huge, huge event. There were some things happened because Tel Aviv, I think at this stage, no, I don't think, I know. Tel Aviv entered this stage from image and myth to something which is much more up to date. This is branding, or self-branding, and this is the beginning. First of all, a new emblem to the city, coat of arms. You see it down on the right, this sun, you know, the center and everything moving out, which is now another symbol of the city. So Tel Aviv has two emblems. That's okay. And all the events which were official, people really didn't care about it. But for the people who did it was very important because they had an all kind of department dealing with the production of Tel Aviv or the production of Tel Aviv 100. And then after the celebrations, what do you do with this department? So the woman who ran it had a brilliant idea. And this is the brilliant idea. Oh, before I go into this brilliant idea, this is also when Tel Aviv attracted world attention. Look, I mean, I'm talking about important newspapers. The Wall Street Journal to the left. I read it. I mean, this is the myth, cosmopolitan paradise in Tel Aviv. On the right is Washington Post. You can read what it says there. Suddenly, Tel Aviv was at the attention of the world, which people were quite happy about it. It's good for tourism, it's good for business, it's good for economy. And you have it. Of course, what is this Tel Aviv? It's only the myth of Tel Aviv. There are so many neighborhoods of Tel Aviv I didn't talk about. I didn't talk about the north, I didn't talk about the east, I didn't even show you Jaffa or the south, because the myth, it exists somewhere which is in the mind of the people. And some buildings, and that's it. But the city is much more than its myth, or much less if you want. So this led to the idea of, let me tell you a piece of Jewish wisdom. It's tails and heads, which is my joke. Tel Aviv an aspiring metropolis, this small city, and the quotation, be a tale to the lion, to the lions actually it should have been, sorry, rather than add to the foxes. By a certain Rabbi Mattia ben Harash, it's from the Ethics of the Fathers, it's 2nd century Jewish text. Only later, everyone, I mean, people know about it. It's this dilemma, what is better, to be a tail to the lion or head to the fox? And he wrote it, he came up with this brilliant idea because his story, personal story, was that he went to Rome, to the center of the empire, and founded a Jewish school there. So he said it's better to be actually a tail to the lion than to stay in Palestine to be the head of the, to the foxes. So Tel Aviv has this dilemma, what should it be? But Tel Aviv has a very original idea how to solve it. We should be both head to the foxes and head to the lions. I mean, because it's not enough to be just heads of the lions. We want to play on a global league. And this is the wannabe global city. This is the new thing. The same woman who produced the celebration, the 100th anniversary, then founded something new. It's called Tel Aviv Global City. And Tel Aviv is trying to be a global city. Which are the global cities? Well, very simple. It's New York, it's Paris, it's London, it's Tokyo, that's for sure. And then there's second league and third league. Tel Aviv would like to be like, I mean, of course the second league is what Tel Aviv is, probably more Barcelona with differences, but they know it, but it doesn't matter. It's the global city. And now you see how city advertises itself, what we are. What we are, well, against this provincialism, I mean, if it appears in the New York Times, of course, it's a kind of a stamp of approval that we cannot deny. Mediterranean capital of cool, Tel Aviv. I don't know what it means. It's Israel's cultural center. That's the head of the foxes, remember? That's the part of it. Yeah. And then you have the number of bars, cafes, and nightclubs, one for every 231 residents. Well, very impressive. What? Oh, yeah, I didn't think about it. Yeah, but that's English, yeah, well, that's good, yeah. It's very cool. I didn't say, you know, Tel Aviv is one of the coldest cities in the winter. Yeah, it's a big surprise. That's because our buildings are not insulated, and believe me, to live in 15 degrees plus, it's very cold. So Tel Aviv is a very cold city, not even cool. And then the issue of startups. This is very Tel Aviv, 800. Well, Tel Aviv is not the startup center of Tel Aviv. There are many centers of startup. And Israel is called the startup nation. I would joke about Tel Aviv and say that Tel Aviv is the upstart city, not the startup, which is like this. But look the numbers, 800. And it tells you a full story that it's as if everything is Tel Aviv. Well, global city. But another thing of it is to be global, is to be part of the geography of the Pride thing events. This last year in May, June, don't remember, 200,000 people. And from all over the world. It was amazing. I didn't go out of the house, of my apartment. The city was stuffed. That's the beach, how it looks. Look how beautiful beaches, look how many people were there, many tourists there. So Tel Aviv is a kind of also a gay capital, considered and is, which is part of the self-image of the city as a secular, hedonistic, vibrant, free, liberal, progressive city. That's the self-image. Today, this morning, I had a telephone call with a reporter in Israel who wanted to interview me, but I'm here, so we did it a little complicated, about the secular city of Tel Aviv. And I have to explain that actually it's a very new thing. Tel Aviv was not founded as a secular city, but it became a secular city. The religious left, and that's what we actually, now the city can celebrate itself without any opposition to this progressivism. Going back to how the city looks, remember at the beginning I told you that the city expands to the north and also up. So this is the up thing. I show you the postcard from 1970 with the one building, 32 stories. Now the city is going up. The same way like, I don't know, is it the same way? But similar to Warsaw, where you see cranes and this high-rise all over the place. That was my first impression of the city, like Tel Aviv, where you see cranes and high-rise. But what I find interesting is that now all these myths converge now. So you build a high-rise, residential one. Imagine Neve Tzedek, I will not talk about it, but white city, which has nothing to do with high-rise. But you see, you combine them, you sell your high-rise through the white city. Tel Aviv, luxury living. Another one to the right, that's a signature building by Richard Meyer. And they, look how they, it was 10 years ago, how they advertise it. Building this white tower over the white city is a dream come true. If you read Hebrew, it says, the graffiti says, it's not our dream. But that's part of the joke, yeah? It's kind of, but it's the white city, towers, and let's talk about towers a little more. This is a postage stamp that appeared in 2014. Tel Aviv Global City, I think it's really chutzpah. I mean, it's a statement that Tel Aviv is a global city with an approval. Of course, it's not. Look down to the new emblem. That's how it looks now. And the old one to the left, small. This is the new Tel Aviv. You can see nice architecture below and the high rise there. And I can only juxtapose it with, on the right, with this beautiful poster from 1938 by a certain Franz Krauss, a new immigrant who came from Austria to Tel Aviv, and this was his vision of Tel Aviv, the city with a future. It's written there. You see these white towers, which is beautiful. I got it from his son who sent it to me. He's a very famous graphic designer. Probably you know, if you know anything about this part of the world, he was the one who made the famous poster of Visit Palestine with the Rock of the Dome. We can see it everywhere. He's the same designer. So I'm very happy that I don't have the rights to it, but I can use it. It's a beautiful thing. It's kind of the vision of the city from 38. And yes, 2014, well, it looks quite similar. And just to show you how it looks today, the different things to the right, on the left, the building from the yellow, 24, the one beside him is 1934, beautifully renovated, and of course the tower, that's a tower which was not our dream. That's how it looks now. The dream came true. And this is the new architecture on the right, but I will not go into it. I mean, I almost at the end of my presentation, the new phase now, which is the big issue, is this talk, conversation about Tel Aviv as the state of Tel Aviv. The Tel Aviv, there's kind of a separatism. The Tel Aviv is not Israel. Israel is backwards, is religious, is militaristic, and Tel Aviv is something global, and we belong to another world. It's about province and center. It's about periphery and center, and there are discussions. But Tel Aviv, of course, which is sometimes not very original, this is how, on the left, Time Out Tel Aviv, how Tel Avivians see the Middle East. You see there is Tel Aviv, and then the river on the north, and then the rest of the country, where you see wars, Syria, jets, Beirut at the end. You see this Tel Aviv, which is something lives in another world. Of course, it's not very original. It's taken from the famous New Yorker cover, which you see on the right. But this is the idea, how Tel Avivians see themselves and the rest of the country. 21st, why 21st? Well, because it's 21st century. But actually also, you know, everyone plays now with ranking. Tel Aviv is ranked in one of these rankings, the 21st city in the world. Number one, I think, is always Vienna somehow. I don't know why. And Tel Aviv is 21st. Well, it's not very high, but nevertheless, that's it. And again, look what they write about us. The New York Times, October 2018, Lonely Planet. And this is the thing of Tel Aviv. This is a kind of, I think they, without being geographers or mythographers or sociologists, they really understand what the city is about, and especially what the city wants to hear about itself. And, oh, I will not go into it yet. Because if I were to sum up Tel Aviv and its mythologies in one sentence, I say that Tel Aviv is special, not in its myth, not in this character that it has, but what is really interesting about Tel Aviv, for me, is that it's a city that in 100 years has been successful in reinventing itself 3, maybe 4 times. This is this dynamism, the ability to reinvent yourself, which is quite I think, very, very special about it. And talking about the non-stop city and all these things, well, there is something I couldn't show you. Tel Aviv is a very noisy city, especially where I live, where all the pubs are, I mean, which is, it's like really hell. This is the hell. So I can say, a little cynically, that in my age, my biggest contribution to nightlife Tel Aviv, and this is a real thing in Tel Aviv, nightlife, which begins very late. My biggest contribution to nightlife in Tel Aviv is when I called the police around 11 to keep them quiet. So I also take part in this. And the Hebrew city, the Zionist enterprise, the city that was the model of the national home, and the city that prides itself for this non-stop thing. Let me conclude with one photo from last Wednesday. I went out to take it. This is Tel Aviv, magic hours when the city stops. Again, it's not terror. It's Yom Kippur in Tel Aviv. These are magic hours. It's quiet. There are no cars. People, children, bicycles, people walking across the streets there. So, I mean, at the end, to see this, I mean, I was quite amazed. Maybe it's age, I don't know. Maybe it's nostalgia, maybe it's, I don't know what it is, to discover that this city, which is so global, that at least one day in the year, it's such a Jewish city. This is funny. Thank you very much. That's it. So now I understand, if I understand right, is the Q&A. And you're the Q and I'm the A. Questions? Don't tell me I told you everything that you wanted to know.
Yes.
Yeah, please.
My name is Monica. I'm from Avignon. I used to live in New York City. Then I relocated to France. And I've been living in Avignon for 25 years. And between New York and France, I've spent 2 months on Cyprus. And that was the first time that I ventured by boat to Haifa and Tel Aviv. My question is, you have very nicely passed over the years 1939, 1945, 46. And I would be curious to know what was happening in Tel Aviv under the British mandate. Thank you.
Okay, I mean, of course I have to apologize. I couldn't tell you anything you told me limited time. What happened in the British, in British Tel Aviv? Not very much. Tel Aviv was a Jewish city. The British were not in the city. Sorry, the British were not in the city. That was part of the issue, that the British was outside. There was no British policemen there and no British army there. Of course, during the Second World War, there were many soldiers, international soldiers, including the Anders Army. I mean, they were stationed in Palestine, and the bars were in Tel Aviv. This was part of the thing. Everyone went there, Canadian, English, Polish. And of course, last years, the 2-3 last years before independence, there were some terror acts by certain organizations, but mainly against Jews, actually, Jews against Jews, certain factions. Not very much. Tel Aviv was, and also in the War of Independence, it was bombed a few times. Oh, during the war, it's something interesting. Tel Aviv was bombed twice by Italian airplanes, which no one understands why. Probably a mistake. But so Tel Aviv was Europe was in a war. Everything was collapsing around, and Tel Aviv was just having fun. That was the Second World War. After that, there was some time of, it was anxious, but then in 1940, the State of Israel was founded in Tel Aviv, declared in Tel Aviv. It's like Philadelphia, you know, where the United States was founded. And then the mayor was busy what to do with Jaffa. I mean, just don't give me Jaffa, please. That's Jerusalem. The British government was in Jerusalem. They were not in Tel Aviv. Tel Aviv was really Hebrew city. That was part of it. You couldn't, if you didn't know, you could see that it's a kind of a capital, a Jewish capital of a state that didn't exist. Yes.
And my name is Michał from Warsaw. My question is about what would be your suggestions, instructions, warnings to all nations that are going to build its own new capital city. We know very well the history of Brasilia, which is called for many architectures actually not a city, but a modern set of buildings without this special character of the city. And now, for example, we know that Indonesia has decided to build its own city. What would be your advice to all these nations? What's the most important?
They never ask me. Well, I would say, I mean, the example of Tel Aviv is nice only because it proves that you can have a vision, you can have an ideology, you have a vision, you have an ideology, you have great ideas, you have architects who think they know what they do, but actually at the end, it's the people there who make the city. And it doesn't matter what you plan. It's kind of, the plans are just a blueprint, and at the end, like in Brasilia too, people use it very differently from the ideas of Niemeyer and all the big architects who were there. So Tel Aviv, I remember a few years ago there was a big discussion in Tel Aviv, like with a lot of people come to see what the municipality can do about the city. I don't know, the only recommendation that I gave there, I can give now is, but again, no one asked me, is the less the municipality or the authorities intervene, the better. Because actually it's the people who make decisions about their life, and they have to live through it. I know it's not much, but that's it.
To ja dla odmiany po polsku, to się wszyscy będziemy świetnie rozumieć. Jestem z Warszawy i zwróciło moją uwagę to parcie do nowoczesności. To znaczy przede wszystkim ta architektura modernistyczna okresu przedwojennego. Ja to odczytałem wręcz jako taką deklarację. To znaczy tutaj w Warszawie na przykład mieliśmy dużo architektów żydowskiego pochodzenia, którzy budowali budynki modernistyczne. I mówiło się, że dzieje się tak dlatego, że oni się dobrze w tym czują. Tutaj patrzyłem na ten stary, nowoczesny Tel Awiw i wydawało mi się, że to właśnie tak jest, że po prostu tworzymy nowy świat, mamy nową szansę i budujemy coś innego niż wszyscy dookoła, czyli że to jest taki jakby styl narodowy, paradoksalnie. Że to jest po prostu taka nowa jakość, my budujemy swoje własne, nowe państwo. Bardzo mnie zastanawia, pani jest geografem, że to przecież nie było tam łatwe. To znaczy, przecież to nie jest taki kraj, w którym łatwo jest o cement, o dobre kruszywa. To musiało być całkiem trudne, a jednak takie decyzje zapadały. Tego typu budynki wymagają bardzo dużych nakładów początkowych, później są tańsze w utrzymaniu, w przeciwieństwie do takiego budownictwa z gliny. Więc tak patrzę
You will
na
have to help me. I mean...
You can't understand? I thought
You want my answer in Hebrew? I can answer you in Hebrew.
Okay, so just making it short. I thought, looking at this old new Tel Aviv, that this modernism was a kind of political declaration. So that really these newcomers created new world. And that this modernism actually was a kind of a national style. That this was new opportunity, and this was something what differentiated them from the state they found on the place. And as you are a geographer, this is obvious that this land is not very friendly for this kind of construction due to lack of materials. This is not that easy, especially when you have no industry, no resources on place. And so for me this was very interesting, and this puzzles me how it actually happened. I feel that there is something behind the scene. It's over.
I hope I understood. If you refer to how it happened, I don't know. I think there is still a black hole about, well, but we don't know much about the creation of the Big Bang. I mean, it's a kind of a Big Bang that happened there. I don't take, just let me know that I answer your question. I don't think it was, what architects thought it was immaterial because they didn't make decisions. It didn't come from above. And the materials, if you talk about materials, yes, it's a big problem. Because it's near the beach, it's corrosion, it's the Mediterranean, it's very hot. I mean, that's really have a very negative impact on these buildings. That's why you have to renovate them. Now I realize about my building every 20 years anew, which is quite costly. So it has costs. And I can tell you a story, but I think it's not an answer. I mean, it's not an answer to you, but we can talk later if you want. When we renovated our first apartment, another one, which is a bad example of international style near the beach, it was in very bad condition, and we didn't have much money to do it. I was much younger, and we did it ourselves. I had to take away all these layers of paint from the wooden parts of doors, etc. And then when we got to the wood, we discovered it was like new. And then I remember my father told me this was wood that was brought in the 30s from Poland. You cannot get it today, so keep the wood. So we kept the wood, yeah. It's a kind of, I don't remember the name of the kind of wood, but it was probably, everyone knew it. Otherwise, it was cheap building. I mean, when you talk about the 30s, thousands of Jews come to the city. It was speculation. People made a lot of money out of the misery of the suffering of others. That's how it is. Of course, all official campaigns were against it, and the quality of building was not always the best. What can you do? This is the price you pay. And especially the sea, and the heat, and the humidity, and everything rusts, and they're cheating. I mean, sometimes contractors cheat too. I mean, you discover it when you work on the buildings, how people cheated, you know, while building the apartment. But if I didn't answer you, I'll do it later, gladly. If you hear that I'm a little personally involved with this architecture, yes, it's true. Yes, I am.
May I? Following maybe the last question, you mentioned the water tower at the very beginning. So, I mean, what was the source? Where the water was taken from? There is no water there.
I love the question. Yeah, no. Yeah. I think when I retire, which is not very far away, I would like to make a documentary about it, the water. I mean, it's an arid country, Palestine. I mean, 8 months without rain, okay? So we have some rivers, and if you're far away, it's not very good. So what do? So modernization of the land, which began in the 19th century, actually with German settlers, never mind, and then the Jews actually who came later used the same techniques, is you dig wells. But in order, underground water, aquifer, there is water there. But in order to get the water to buildings, you have to have water towers. So part of, I mean, it's nothing to do with Tel Aviv, even so in Tel Aviv there is 2 beautiful water towers from the 20s, beautiful. But the whole idea is that when you look at the landscape of the country, British Palestine, you could say, you could identify a Christian village, Arab Christian village, you could see the church. And if it was an Arab, a Muslim Arab village or neighborhood, you could see the mosque, the minaret. And the Jewish kibbutz or settlement, you could see the water tower. So really, you can really recognize by just looking at it. Yeah. So, yeah. Don't tell me I told you everything.
I have a couple of questions about the contemporary time. So you showed us that the population of Jerusalem is growing while the population of Tel Aviv is quite stable. So why is that? And I think in addition to that, so what are other business centers of Israel today other than Tel Aviv?
Well, did I mention Tel Aviv already? Okay, it's a little bit more complex. Of course, it's Tel Aviv. Tel Aviv is, in the city, is not so very big. It's only 400 something, yeah, 50 now maybe. But of course it's surrounded by, there is a greater Tel Aviv. Separate independent cities which, if you don't know, for you are Tel Aviv. I know because I learned the maps, yes. But a different municipality. There were many attempts to create a kind of a greater Tel Aviv, but it always fails because local politicians don't like to share power with others, which I can understand. So it never works. We have the same transport authority, which is very bad, because Tel Aviv, the most important thing in Tel Aviv is building now the first metro and the first tram, the first line, the red line. It's called the red line because it's only on the maps and it's red. That's my interpretation why it's called the red line. There will be a green line later also on the maps. They are building. It's a kind of a modern city without mass transportation system. But that's because there was no central authority to regulate things. It was from below. People built. That's how it looks. And as a true Tel Avivians or a New Yorker, I don't have a car. That's part of being Tel Aviv. So the center is around Tel Aviv. It can be 5 kilometers to the north, 10 kilometers to the south, but it's Tel Aviv. The government subsidizes a center in Jerusalem, but when the government subsidizes something, it means there is a problem. So there is a Haifa too, and in Beersheba too, but it's always Tel Aviv. Everything, Israel is small, geographically speaking. So I teach at Haifa, and Haifa is, it's a little problem there. They keep asking what's the problem of Haifa. I would say, Haifa, just let me say a few words on Haifa. Haifa was in the 20s, the 30s, was supposed to be the major city of Palestine with Jerusalem, because the British built there the imperial port of Haifa, with oil pipes coming from Iraq to Haifa and further to, that was kind of an imperial center. And then in 48, the British left, the border to Iraq was closed, and the port became an Israeli port, yes? So this is Haifa. So what's the problem of Haifa? It's too close to Tel Aviv. That's why I ask people today, how far away is Gdansk or Lvov to see, not Lvov, Gdansk, Lodz and other cities to see. Actually, you have to have a certain distance for other places to develop a centers. Otherwise, what do Haifa people do? They come to Tel Aviv to see the theaters because that's where all the theaters are, and go back to Haifa. They sleep there. You can tell us more about it. She lived there for a while, yeah. And about numbers, I don't think it's very important. For me, it's interesting. It's, of course, Tel Aviv is a secular, sociologically middle-class, Ashkenazi Jews mainly, which is, of course, a myth, but that's actually, sociologically, it's richer people are well-to-do, which means less children. First, second, and third rule of demography, yes? Less children. Birth rate is lower. And Jerusalem, you have Arabs and ultra-Orthodox with huge families. That's why the numbers look like this. But things change in Tel Aviv, and I don't have explanation, no one has it. That now the norm in Tel Aviv is 3 children per family. You see children everywhere. The municipality has a problem building new kindergartens. It's a real problem, they talk about it. They just opened a kindergarten in the building adjacent to us with a lot of noise. It's illegal, but they do it. And probably it will be very hard to get them away because they need kindergarten. So things change. I don't know, but the population will go. People stay in Tel Aviv. Even so, it's very expensive city. Very expensive. You can ask how much it cost. 4 times more than, I think, Warsaw. This was my second question in Warsaw. And in other cities too. Yeah? Mm-hmm.
Excuse me, I was in Tel Aviv only once, and I had a chance to visit the Museum of the Diaspora, which is inside the Tel Aviv University, which I found was one of the best museums on the Jewish life.
I will tell the curator, nice.
Yeah, but what I wanted to say, you said it's a city peopled by the Ashkenazim, but from the books I've read, and I've read quite a number of books by Israeli authors taking place in Tel Aviv, I understand that also Sephardim in Tel Aviv. Not to mention the Yemeni, etc.
You have everyone in Tel Aviv. Everyone is there. Actually, it's more status and money than everything else. Even so, the south is more traditional. and right wing, and the north is more, this is how Tel Aviv works, southwest. And labor is the strongest part in Tel Aviv, that's clear. And there are hardly religious people in Tel Aviv. So Tel Aviv is everything but, actually, you can model go, so that's how Tel Aviv is. But you visited the Diaspora Museum in the north. Of course, one of the jokes is that for someone like me who lives in the center, the city called the Old North, I would say that everything beyond the river, where you were, the Tel Aviv University, it's not Tel Aviv. I mean, that's one of the jokes, because people, Tel Avivians are considered to be arrogant, and everything which is not their neighborhood, which is the center of the city, is not Tel Aviv. Yeah, of course, this Ramat Aviv, which is in the north, the new areas of the city from the 50s, 60s, 70s, they are no place. They look like everything else. They have nothing. You can just put them elsewhere and it's okay. Like it could be Hajfie, it could be everywhere. But this is kind of a joke, these Tel Avivians that, but if you ask like this, Tel Aviv is a city of immigrants. In the 30s, 40s, 50s, there were Jews coming to Israel. In the 80s, 90s, it's people immigrating to the big city from the periphery, from the province. That's like New York. Tel Aviv is made by people who were not born and raised there. Tel Aviv will bring their energies to the city, which means that actually the province or the periphery is doomed to fail, because if you are successful, you move to Tel Aviv, and then you complain about Tel Aviv. So this is a little sociology, of course, but this is the way it works. This is the state of Tel Aviv, as I say, the bubble. They have now a new transport system in Tel Aviv, like Uber, but it's called the bubble. What a coincidence. Yeah.
You said something about the myth of Tel Aviv, because everybody has its own opinion. I spent almost half a year in Tel Aviv in 1987. It was just end of winter and spring and a bit of summer. And my memories of that time, of course, Poland and Warsaw was different 30 years ago, and Tel Aviv was different. But I love Tel Aviv. What I want to say that the memories that I have was like I had is a Dizengoff Street with plenty of the coffee shops and the people speaking Polish there, ladies sitting in a nice dress and nicely, you know, with nice perfumes and bags and everything, and spending time there. I remember Allenby Street, that I was working there, and commuting on the special bus.
This is Dizengoff Street, yeah.
Yes, you said something about the communication, the transportation. There was a bus, like minivan, that you pay a few shekels, and the driver opens with the special device the door. I don't know whether it still exists. And I remember walking.
But they built the red line now.
Yeah, and I remember walking in the evenings and looking to people's window. And the first time I saw, because as you can see on the picture, the buildings were in your area most probably, like Jabotinsky Street and so on. I live in the hotel which was near the Ben Yehuda Street. So I walk on the street and was looking into the windows and seeing paintings, a lot of paintings on the wall that I adore. People had like from the top to the bottom. And what else? Which is like something that I cherish, a lot of art galleries. When I used to zigzag the streets between the let's say, Allenby and the Beach Street just to see the small galleries. So do they still exist? And does the Dizengoff had a similar charm? And are the buses same? This is my question. I've never been there later.
This is an answer to the guy who asked me before what should be done. I mean, Dizengoff Street was the main thoroughfare of Tel Aviv in the 50s, 60s, the Bohemian Center, and yes, the coffee shop Roval, probably you didn't see it anymore, for where the people from Poland were sitting. That was the bourgeois, petty bourgeois one, the Bohemian Center. Things changed, Dizengoff fell down, and the municipality tried to do many things to revive the street. And then December 2009, someone took a place and opened a bar there, and ever since the street is full of bars. without the municipality, they are very noisy. This is the noise I was talking about. Because people sit outside until 3 or 4 o'clock with a lot of noise, a lot of energy. If you are a guest in the city, it's great. If you live there, it's less. But that's the way it is. Yes, no, Tel Aviv is full of energy, but I do say, you could hear it. I mean, actually, I'm a local patriot, that's for sure. I mean, it was very fun for me to say, it's a new city actually, but I was able to tell my daughter, when she first asked where my family came from originally, from the grandparents, and I told her that the only thing she should know is that she went to the same primary school as her grandfather. And they said, no, that's not what I asked. I mean, I asked something else. I said, well, it was so long ago that I don't remember, okay? But I feel really connected to the city in this sense. But on the other hand, I'm very well aware, I mean, not critical, but a little ironic, that Tel Aviv has this very provincial character. I mean, New York doesn't need any confirmation. Tel Aviv needs it constantly. When I take Tel Aviv, I'm talking about the 500 people who are busy with themselves and the city. That's the minority, the cultural elite that makes the city what it is. They talk about the city, they are part of the conversation about the city, they write articles in the newspapers about the city, and they define what others think, yes? And they need all the time confirmation that the city is great. As I said at the beginning, the city is as great as people talk about it. And people talk about Tel Aviv, much about Tel Aviv. Like, I remember talking about this idea of Tel Aviv. In the 90s, New York, of course, what is New York? New York is the Big Apple, right? So Tel Aviv, well, it can be the Big Apple, so it's the Big Orange. And then people got a little bit more modest, and then it became the Small Apple. So they all the time compare. I mean, in the 20s, when there were some 30,000, 40,000 people there, you can read in the newspaper, Tel Aviv is like small Paris. Okay. Of course, every city that respected itself should be like Paris. You know, like Buenos Aires was the Paris of South America, and Bucharest still thinks it's Paris. Look at the streets. But of course, yes, you're very right. Tel Aviv was Odessa from the start. All the street names are Odessa, not places in Odessa, but Zionists from Odessa who took part, including Dizengoff. Yes, this provincialism, but this is nice about the city. And as long as the city can keep this self-irony about itself and make fun of itself, that's okay, like this joke about the restaurant and the port, yes? Sometimes people tend to take it seriously, which makes it a little funny. But as much as I hear from visitors to the city, people like it. They go to the beach immediately, they enjoy it, they go and have fun. Probably I'm too old for that, I don't know. That's why I write about it.
Hi, so I have a question concerning what you just said, because when I was in Tel Aviv, I had a feeling like I couldn't decide Tel Aviv is like Paris, or Tel Aviv is like Berlin, or Tel Aviv is like Warsaw, I don't know. And you said that when buildings are renovated, the authorities, they don't allow to close the balconies. And I was wondering, how do people find a way to do this their own way? Like, I put a little something here so I can close it, or maybe I don't close it. Do they comply with the rules? Or what's the Tel Avivian spirit? What do you say? Like, what's the Tel Aviv thing?
Cheat as much as you can.
Sorry?
Cheat as much as you can and don't get caught.
Yeah. So another question. So, like, what is a no-no in Tel Aviv? Like, no, we don't do it here. Like, no, you don't do it here. Like,
oh, it's a tough question.
In Tel Aviv?
No, they are nude. No. They walk nude in the streets now. I mean, yeah. I mean, very minimalistic, let's say. Okay, this is what I said about the difference between the beach and the city in the 30s, 40s, 50s. I mean, the whole city looks like a beach now. I mean, because it's also because it's very hot and humid. I mean, it's very rational to dress like this. But yes, no. It's a kind of it's funny. It's not funny. Interesting question. What is a no-no in Tel Aviv? I don't think there is a no-no. People will fight, but every big city will fight for parking places, but I don't care, I don't have a car. Fight for parking places, yes. They will be very aggressive if the municipality will take some parking places. This is where the people are really get angry. Just happened a month ago. They are really very radical and they win. It took a municipality 1 week to retract their decision. There are many dogs in Tel Aviv. I remember the jokes 5 years ago that there were more dogs in Tel Aviv than babies, but this changed. There are also many cats in Tel Aviv if you paid attention. And there is this phenomenon of feeders. Feeders. There are stray cats all over the place in yards, and there are people who feed them, me included. Some people don't like it, that's the issue. Sometimes there is an issue there. And the municipality tries to castrate the cats, so they will not be more and more, but yeah. So the cats, I mean, some people see the cats. It's full of cats, like savannah. Hmm? Yeah, well, you don't have many rats. Maybe, yes. No, they are very lazy cats because they are being fed. I mean, they don't have to do anything.
I have a question. I wanted to ask you something a bit in line with the previous question. So, regarding the buildings, sorry?
I'm very serious.
So, regarding the buildings from the 20s, 30s, 40s, like the modernist buildings, is there any legal protection of the building, and any special protection if you want to change it or demolish?
Oh yeah, yeah. It is regulated. Okay, so I don't find it. It doesn't matter. It's very well regulated in a funny way sometimes. And yes, this is the simple question. Yes, you are not allowed to do what you want. It's a kind of, which means that you are not allowed to do what you want with buildings which are listed, or there are 1,000 buildings listed, which is a big issue because you lose money. You don't have building rights to add. Now they add. I just read a few days ago that some 100 owners sued the municipality and it's gone to court now because they lost money because it was listed. So yes, this is maybe a no-no thing. I mean, you are not supposed to, it's a good thing, yeah, you have to comply with the building rules in this area about historical buildings. People are very much into this heritage thing. The myth of the white city really penetrated. People are, it's part of the DNA of the city. I remember the building where I lived, there was just on the other side of the street, a very ugly, very simple, functional building, really ugly, nothing. And then it was demolished, something new was built. I remember one of the neighbors who suddenly paid attention. She doesn't pay attention to what happens. And I said, oh, the demolished building, it was such a nice, beautiful building. Tel Aviv is in a stage of its history where everything which is old is nice, which is not true, of course. This is a problem. Yeah, so this is the answer, I would say. Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, I think I say thank you very much for you being here and asking questions. Thank you.